Hello and welcome to this tutorial on the basics of 2D animation in Blender 2.8, brought to you by Falzon Tutorials, the channel that teaches you how to use creative software. My name is Hayden Falzon from falzonfantasy.com, and today I'm going to show you how to set up a 2D scene within Blender. I'm also going to explain how 2D works within Blender, because it works a little bit differently than other 2D softwares. And then I'm going to give a few examples of different methods and approaches that you can use to animate shapes in Blender. So, let's get started. Now to begin, I'm going to have the keycast keys open at the bottom, and that way you'll be able to follow along what I'm doing, as well as know what keys I'm pressing. I'll also try and say what keys I'm pressing, but sometimes I may forget, so in that case, just refer to the bottom half of the screen. Okay, so I'm going to first show you how to open a preset 2D scene. Now there are three ways of creating a 2D scene within Blender. Well, actually there are a few more, but three main ways. The first two are relatively similar, and the third is more for people who have a fairer understanding and grasp over Blender's UI and tools. So that's why I'm going to show you the first two ways, and I'm just going to explain the third way. So the first way is to come up here to File, and then come down here to New, and then as you'll see there's General, 2D Animation, Sculpting, VFX, and Video Editing. Now we want the 2D Animation one, so once we hit this, it's going to load up a new scene, and it's set up our 2D scene so that we're ready to start drawing right away. The next way is once we've opened Blender. So if I just open up a new Blender, now before we exit the splash screen, there'll be a little prompt giving us new file and again 2D animation. So it's exactly the same as the way before, it's just a quicker and faster way if you're just starting up Blender for the first time. And again, we are ready to start drawing straight away. It's pretty great. But what next? Well, a lot of people come into Blender as a 3D tool. It's not often associated with 2D works. This association is only really starting to take off since the release of 2.8. Now I'm just going to show you a few issues that you may fall into as a beginner. One of them being the camera. The camera is still very much a 3D camera. So if you accidentally, for example, do this with your scene and you want to know how to get back in, well, first things first, you can either press 0 on your numpad, come down here where it says viewpoint. So another way you can do it is come up here to where it says view, come down here to viewpoint and set it to camera. You'll also notice that it's got the shortcut key next to it. So hitting that. Also, I should mention that I'm using 2.79 keys because that's what I'm used to. So if you're using 2.8 keys, some of the shortcuts may be a little bit different, but don't worry, all that you have to do to find them is just come up here to Preferences and then go to your key map, Preferences, and you can search for the key. So that's how we would fix the camera view. Another thing that may occur when you're first starting out in 2D animation in Blender is that you may change the interaction mode. So interaction modes in Blender are object-specific modes that allow you to interact with them in different ways. So the object that we're actually drawing within is called a stroke in Blender. You can see it up here. And within that stroke, layers are saved. And within those layers, strokes are saved on different keyframes. It's a little bit complicated, but once you get your head worked around this concept of the strokes being saved to unique frames within unique layers, within a unique object, you kind of can make sense of it. So, up here is the interaction mode menu. There are multiple ways of accessing this menu, but this is by far the most easy. As you can see, when I click on it, it's given me a list of options that I can do. There is object mode, edit mode, sculpt mode, draw, which is the current one we're in, as you can see, and there's also weight paint. As a beginner, you will not need to know about majority of these. The only ones that you will need to really know is draw mode, edit mode, and sculpt mode. And in some ways, you will have to know about object mode, but object mode is kind of a universal interaction mode. So if I just click to it, this is the sort of default mode for any object within Blender. And it just means that I'm able to move it around in space. I'm pressing G to move, by the way. Just think of G to grab. So, back into draw mode. I personally would not use object mode to move around your object. Think of this, for those of you coming from traditional 2D animation softwares, think of object mode as transforming the entire layer that you're on, which is something that we don't necessarily want to do. We want to transform elements within the layer, but we do not want to transform the entire layer in most cases. So, if you are looking to transform elements within a layer, your best bet is to go into edit mode. Now, nothing much has changed here, but you'll notice that when I select this object here, highlight the entire stroke. And that is because of our different types of selection modes within our edit mode. So this one here selects the whole stroke, and well, essentially all points on a stroke, because strokes are made out of points, which I'll show you just now. This is points only, so think of it like vertex edit. So this is showing us a really good example of how the strokes are constructed. It's just lots of points in space and then interpolation in between them. So it's a vector, more or less. And then this one here is select all strokes between other strokes. So to give an example of this, let me just go into draw mode and let me just quickly draw another stroke along this stroke here. And then let's go back into edit mode by coming up here to edit mode, select it, and let's see if that works. Voila, see, I've selected a point on this part of the stroke. Even though the stroke continues over here, it only goes to where the stroke is intersected. Now this is really useful, especially if you're drawing, for cleaning up your strokes. So if you've got an outlying stroke, just select this here, select all the points on the stroke, and press X to delete, and delete the points. Let me also turn on that shortcuts. There we go. You've turned off on me. And that's how we would go about editing strokes using our basic tools. Let me go back to draw. Now, the drawer is where you're going to be spending most of your time. As I said before, think of draw as points on a screen within a layer in a stroke, which are all held within a keyframe. So if I move to a different keyframe and draw a new stroke, I have created new information. As you can see, that has been updated to reflect this. This timeline here has generated a new keyframe where I've moved this timeline widget to. And I have a new stroke on a new keyframe within the same layer, lines, which is all held within this object stroke. I really want to get that hammered in. So it's a bit of confusing sort of hierarchy of things, but once you get that, you will have a better understanding on how 2D animation within Blender works. Excellent. Now, I can move this keyframe around. So all that I'm doing to do that is just essentially right-clicking it and then pressing G to move. So remember, G to grab, and I'm just moving it along the timeline. We could also delete data in the same way we would delete points, just pressing X and deleting that keyframe. I'm going to make sure that I'm on 1 again. You always want to make sure that you're on the keyframe that you wish to edit. It is very important that you do this. So now that I am, I'm just going to swap over to edit mode, and I'm just going to delete those points there. Excellent. Also, if you're looking for more tutorials on Blender and other creative software, be sure to check out the rest of my videos. I've got a lot of content out already, some of which is up to date. A lot of it is 2.8 Blender, and some of it is 2.79 and below. You can also be updated on a new video's release by hitting that bell button. Also, if you'd like some one-on-one training, be sure to check out my Fiverr Blender course, the link of which will be in the description below. So let's get back to this tutorial. Now, as I was explaining about that hierarchy of object, layer, stroke in a keyframe, layers have a lot of utility. Think of them almost like Photoshop layers with just a lot less. So I'm just going to delete that layer there, and I'm just going to call this one draft. I'm double clicking to rename something. When I draw now on this layer, I've created new information within it. You can see that our draft layer is down here, and if I turn this off, you'll see that the stroke disappears. Another great utility about layers is the ability to clip details. So if I go over here to this toolbar and select a new pencil preset, I'm just going to select this F pen, and I'm also going to come down here to my material properties, and I'm going to set a fill. Now I'm going to explain the materials in just a bit, but for now, let's just do this. Whoops. It always pays to pay attention to what you're doing. I'm just going to turn that on as such, and then I'm just going to delete all of that and going back into draw mode. So I'm just going to draw a very basic circle. Excellent, pretty shabby work. But now, if I go to my layers, because that's on draft, if I create a new layer, and I call this overlay, and then I set this icon to on, this is masking. So what it's going to do, it's going to mask this layer according to the layer below it. So if I just go back to my materials property and select this red, and I start drawing, remember I'm on my overlay layer. You can see because down here overlay is highlighted. So if I just come over here and I just make a nice drawing as such, you'll see that the red, even though I started drawing up here, the red does not continue past this black. So let me do it again. Do you see how I can then quite easily keep my artwork within the frame of this silhouette? It just makes for some really useful. This makes animating quite easy. This is a very useful tool, and I highly suggest everyone to. So now let's look at materials, because I'm sure a lot of you are going like, what's going on here? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And as if you're coming from a traditional 2D animation software, it might not be making any sense because it's a little finicky. Think of each color that you have as a paint on a palette. And what that means is you have to create a unique color, or unique material, I should say, for each and every color or material that you want to use. You can't just mix and match just yet. There is an update coming to Blender, I believe. I'm not sure when it comes out. It could even be out already by the time you're watching this video. That does away with that by introducing vertex colors, but we won't go into that just yet. We'll just keep it basic. And essentially, you have to create a new material for each color that you make, because you can't update the colors. So if I was to change this fill color, for example, because I want to start a new fill over here and I want it to be blue, and I go, okay, I've already got a fill here. I'm just going to select that and I'm going to make it blue. And uh-oh, what's happened? That original color has been turned blue, which is just a bit of a pitfall within Blender 2D animation. I think the new updates are really going to be useful in this regard, because having multiple materials for just a few colors can get overwhelming very quickly. So that's one thing that I would say is a fairly large negative within Blender's 2D animation at the moment. But as I said before, it is being addressed. So to create a new material, all that we have to do is press this Add Material slot. I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to rename it to Red Fill. And then I'm going to either deselect stroke and add a fill, and then I'll just set that fill to a red. I can also include the stroke because, as you can see, the stroke's going to disappear, or it's not going to even appear at all, apparently. That's right, because we are on our overlay layer. Let me just go to my draft layer quickly. See here, that stroke outline, it gets deleted as soon as we put down the stroke. That's because there's no stroke on. So I'm just going to change the color. You can use the Pickwick and it keeps the stroke. There are a lot of different options within these tools, but for now, just keep it nice and simple and don't change any of the options just yet. If you're a bit more intermediate, by all means, you have a better understanding on what these do. So now that we've created a new material, we can start using it. In fact, let's create some nice wings for our character. How about one here and one here? Now, as you can see, because they are created on the overlay layer, you're starting to see the actual stroke data that was hidden before by this red mask. That's okay. This is just a fairly basic example. Okay. Now that we have a picture that we're half happy with, what we're able, and what I'm sure the point of you clicking on this video, is we want to animate it. So we would then scrub forward in our timeline, and one way that a lot of people animate is they animate keyframes and then they come back and do the in-betweens. Now I'm going to show you a few different ways. First way is exactly that. So we're going to be creating a keyframe. So let's just get my black again, and I'm just going to very simply create a sort of a circle where let's in fact turn him towards us, if I can get it correct. This is half of what it is. It's just retrying the shape over and over again. So once I've done that shape, I also want to come over here and select my red fill, and I'm just going to quickly create the wings as such, sticking out of him like this. There we go. And then I want to come over here to the red, and then I'm going to select my overlay, and I'm just going to jot in the eyes. So one eye's here, and the other eye's here. And I'll just give him that those stripes. There we go. So, you know, not an amazing... Oh, and I forgot his mouth. Of course. Let's get that little mouth in there. So we have essentially created the very basics of a turn. Another way that we're able to animate in Blender, let me just remove this and put it over here, just out of the way, is we can actually use the already pre-established picture and just move it over. One way we can do that is we can duplicate by pressing Shift and D, not Shift and S, Shift and D, and just duplicate those keyframes over to frame 10. So as you can see, we've got a duplicate of our keyframe. Now, if we were to edit this frame here, you'll see how it only shows up once we pass this frame. That's because it's a unique data set within the stroke. And so now that we have this new picture, we're able to edit it. So I can come over here to edit mode, select all my points by pressing A to select all, and then I can move it within the scene. So maybe I want to move it over here, maybe I'll give it a bit of rotation as well, pressing R to rotate it. And then I'm just going to put it over here. And now we have some movement. We didn't have to redraw anything. All that we did was duplicate this keyframe, put it over here, go into edit mode, and then manipulate all the points by pressing A to select all, and then moving it with our basic transformational tools. If you also would like, you can bring up the transformational widgets over here on your toolbar, which you can bring up by pressing T. Now you may want to create some in-betweens. One way that we can do it is by drawing in between here. We can even duplicate it and put it in between again, but a faster way would be having a selection. So let me just select draft. I'm going to draw, interpolate, and interpolate. Then I'm just going to interpolate it by maybe 50%. I'm just going to type 50 on my keyboard, and then I'm going to press enter. Now it's only interpolated that layer. We have to come up here again to the overlay and do the same thing. So draw, interpolate, interpolate, and then I'll put 50% again, and we should have the same picture. So that's another way of getting information within Blender. I would very much like it that you should be able to interpolate multiple frames at once. If there is a way, please let me know. I couldn't seem to get it working on my setup, but I'm sure one of you, my fantastic community, would have found it if it is there. Okay. And another way that we can animate things, and I'm sure a lot of people who are a bit more advanced with 2D animation will be quite happy to look at this one, is we can link the object up. So we can link this object to another object, and then move that object as a transform while animating this one. So just to give a slight example, I'm just going to create a range of 20 frames here. I'm also going to set end frame to 20, so we have a looping animation. And then I'm just going to change a few things within it. First things first, I'm just going to go to edit mode. I'm also going to duplicate that frame as before. And then I'm going to select both wings, making sure that that edit mode selection is on, and I'm going to delete those points. Now I'm going to go back to my red fill, and I'm going to draw some points in, making sure that I'm no longer in edit mode. So let me just tap out of that, go into draw mode, and then I'm going to add a, whoopsie daisies, again, making sure that we are in draft mode, draft layer, excuse me. I'm just going to make a very basic flapping. A basic flapping shape. As such. So let me move this back to here. And let's create one more. So I'm just going to duplicate it and move it to here. And then I'm going to, again, edit mode, delete those points there. And then I'm just going to go back into draw mode, making sure that I'm in draft because that's the layer that I want. And then I'm just going to create those wings there. I'm just going to create this one over here. Now we're going to notice a little problem, and that's the Z depth. To fix Z depths, there are multiple ways of doing it. You can do it within the layers. Another way we can do it is actually literally manipulating the Z depth. Because it's a 3D program still, we're able to do that. So let me show you. See how it's 3D? If I move this wing by pressing G and then pressing G and Y, I'm able to move that object. Now, first things first, you won't notice any change. That's because if I go into my object properties, go into my strokes, you'll see the strokes depth order is 2D layers. We can also set it to 3D location. That should fix up a few issues if you're using that sort of Z depth, but it may create other issues. So you want to be careful with this one. I'm going to use it for now because I find it a little bit easier. And there we have a basic. I'm also going to just edit the Z depth of all the elements a little bit, making sure that I'm on the correct keyframe. See what I did there? I tried to edit it, and I edited it there, but it created new data, which is not what we want at all. So we want to make sure that we're on the right keyframe and we are editing that element correctly. So let me move this forward. And then I'm going to move this backwards. And then I'm just going to move, again, this forward. If you're more used to 2D animation softwares, I would use the 2D depth sorting and use layers instead. I'm only doing this because I am fairly used to 3D. So now that we've got this, I made a mistake. See here, I made this mistake here. Very simple. Should be all fixed now. So our little B, let me just duplicate all these points and like this so that we've got a animation that lasts a little while, and then I'm just going to set it to where does it end? It ends at 153. I'm going to set it to 152 frames. Excellent. So now that we got this little fly guy moving, these wings in animation, what I can then do is create an empty. What I'm doing to get that is pressing Shift A while in object mode. You can also go up here to add and then come down here to empty and create any empty. I'm just going to create a circle for now and sort of just create it around my little bee guy. I'm also going to select the stroke because remember how the hierarchy works. Stroke, layers, and then strokes within the layers on different keyframes. And then I'm going to, while holding Shift, select my empty, and then going to press Control and P to parent this stroke to this empty. I'm going to set parent to object, and now I can use this empty to move my stroke around. So if I just press play and press G, I can move this object while it's flapping its wings. So let me just do that very quickly. So to animate non-2D software, 2D objects within Blender, we have to change our key type from grease pencil to dope sheet. And I'm just going to set my keyframe here. I'm moving it, and then I'm pressing I to insert a keyframe. I'm just going to set it to location. Then I'm just going to come over here to 108, well, no, just 80. And I'm just going to move it over here, location, and then I'm going to set it back to the original value by literally just clicking it, duplicating it like before, Shift D, and dragging it over here. So now what we have is this looping animation of this, well, this incredibly angry, weird looking bee or fly flapping and going back and forth. By no means a masterful animation, but I hope that this shows you the fundamentals of animating within Blender. I would like to thank every single one of you who has gotten to this point in the video. It really means a lot to me. I hope that you have found the content very helpful. If you have, be sure to give it a like and consider subscribing and hitting that bell button. It means a lot to me. And if you still need a little extra help, please comment down below and either myself or another person a part of our great community will be sure to get back to you. If that doesn't help, I also have a Fiverr where I conduct one-on-one sessions with people from all around the world, so don't be shy. If you need a little bit of extra help or would like to get a bit of a head start on things and want one-on-one coaching, the link for that will be in the description. So thank you so much for watching. This is Hayden Falzon from falzonfantasy.com signing off.